I still remember the scent of fresh paint clinging to my hair like the final proof that this place was ours. I had spent weeks with my sleeves rolled up, brushing warmth onto cold walls, coaxing life into empty rooms. Even the nails in my palms still stung from hanging up the last frame that very morning. A picture of us on our wedding day, laughing so freely I sometimes wondered who that girl was, who that man was. My name is Leonie Ward, and for 3 years I told everyone that my husband, Marcus, was the best thing that had ever happened to me. And for 3 years I think I believed it. Until the day I saw him standing in the middle of our brand new kitchen, all shining marble counters, and that ridiculous brass faucet I fought so hard for, standing there, with his arm draped around the shoulder of a man I didn't recognize. Smiling, explaining, estimating. It started the way all betrayals do, so ordinary it could have slipped by unnoticed. Our housewarming party was supposed to be a celebration. Friends drifting from room to room, wine glasses in hand, saying things like, "Oh Leonie, it's beautiful, you've really outdone yourself," while I glowed from the inside out. I'd baked lemon tarts because they were Marcus's favorite. I even wore the blue dress he once said made me look like a painting. I saw him talking to a stranger by the fireplace. That was normal. Marcus was always better at socializing than me. He made everyone feel like they'd known him forever. But then I caught a scrap of conversation that didn't sound like congratulations. It sounded like negotiation. I hovered by the doorway, pretending to tidy up empty plates and napkins. My ears strained to catch every word. "So you're saying with the current market, it could fetch more than we thought?" the stranger asked, tapping a folder against his thigh. Marcus laughed, that easy, careless laugh that once charmed me to pieces. "At least my share, yeah. If things don't work out, I want to make sure I'm getting what I deserve." My chest turned to lead. I felt like I was drifting above my own body, looking down at a woman I didn't recognize. A woman who stood frozen while her husband carved up their future like a piece of stale bread. The man noticed me first. He cleared his throat, trying to look apologetic. "Hi, you must be Leonie. I'm Tom Myers. Marcus asked me to come by and take a look. You know, just in case." Just in case. Just in case what? That I didn't keep my side of the vows? That I burned the lemon tarts? That I failed at being enough for him? I turned to Marcus, who shrugged, that same infuriating half-smile dancing at the corners of his mouth. "It's not a big deal, babe. It's just an estimate. Don't look so serious." Don't look so serious. The rest of the party blurred into a fever dream. People laughing, the music drifting from room to room, the sound of wine bottles uncorking, and all the while, that man, that realtor, jotting down notes, measuring the crown molding I spent weeks researching. The patio I chose because I dreamed of sitting there with a baby asleep on my chest. I slipped upstairs at one point, into the bathroom, where I thought I could cry alone. But the tears didn't come. I just stared at myself in the mirror. The blue dress like a bruise against my skin, the lipstick smudged where I'd chewed my bottom lip raw. I pressed my palms to the marble countertop. The same cold marble Marcus insisted we couldn't afford, until I found a local supplier willing to cut me a deal. It was mine, this home, these walls, this life, mine. And he was weighing it on a scale behind my back. When the last guest left, and the laughter trailed off down our new driveway, I cornered Marcus in the kitchen. The realtor had gone. It was just us, the empty glasses, the plates crusted with cake, the heavy silence pressing down on us like a storm cloud. "Why?" I asked. My voice was steady, but inside, I was a hurricane. He leaned back against the counter, arms folded. "Why? What? Why bring a realtor here tonight? Why have him estimate your share like this was just some business deal?" He rolled his eyes. "Don't be dramatic, Leonie. It's called being prepared. You know how things are. People get divorced every day." Divorced. The word hit me like a slap. "So you're already planning for it?" I demanded. "Before we've even slept a single night in this house?" He shrugged again, that infuriating calmness wrapping around him like armor. "Look, if you'd rather not talk about it now, that's fine. But I'm not going to be the guy who loses everything just because you decide you're unhappy one day." "You?" "Because I might decide. Because he was so sure the problem would be me." I don't remember what I said after that. Maybe I didn't say anything at all. Maybe I just stood there and listened to the echo of our promises cracking open, one by one, until the only thing I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. That night, I lay awake on our brand new mattress, staring at the ceiling I'd painted eggshell white. Marcus snored beside me, undisturbed, his back turned, already halfway into a life that didn't have me in it. But sleep didn't come for me. Instead, an idea did. A tiny seed of defiance. If he wanted to tally up what was his, maybe it was time I started keeping my own ledger too. Because this house, these walls, they were not for sale. Not to him, not to anyone. And I wasn't either. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. I lay in bed for hours that night, wide-eyed in the dark, my mind mapping out every corner of the house Marcus thought he could carve into pieces. The moonlight spilled through the half-open curtains, catching on the faint patterns of plaster I'd so carefully chosen for our bedroom ceiling. Funny how details like that seem to glow sharper when the rest of your life blurred at the edges. By dawn, I hadn't slept. The house felt like it was vibrating with my heartbeat. I slipped out of bed without a sound, careful not to wake him. I stood at the bedroom door for a moment, just watching him breathe. My husband, the man who once traced my spine with his fingertips and whispered that I was his home. Now he wanted a realtor to put a price on that promise. Downstairs, the kitchen was a battlefield of empty glasses and abandoned plates, but I didn't touch a thing. I sat at the dining table instead, my phone in hand, staring at my reflection in its black screen. It was like staring into a window that showed me the version of myself I'd buried for too long, the version that didn't need permission to fight back. By 7, I drafted a list, a ledger of my own, not of money or shares, but of all the things I'd built with my bare hands while Marcus stood around, charming the world. The calls I'd made to contractors. The nights I'd stayed up comparing quotes to save us thousands. The connections I'd made at work that helped us secure the mortgage, when Marcus's commission-only income left banks skeptical. I typed every detail into my phone, one line at a time, like laying bricks for a fortress. I was still staring at that list when Marcus finally stumbled downstairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes like he had nothing to lose. He glanced at me, then at the mess. "You've been up all night?" He asked it like he was the concerned husband. Like he hadn't dropped a bomb in the middle of my heartwarming party just hours before. I didn't answer. I just pushed my chair back and went upstairs to shower. The hot water scalded my skin, but it didn't wash away the sting. I could feel the walls of our new house pulsing around me, almost like they were siding with me, ready to keep secrets he'd never understand. By the time I came back down, he was sitting at the counter with his phone, texting like nothing had happened. He didn't even look up when I grabbed my keys from the bowl by the door. "Where are you going?" he asked, finally. "Out," I said. Just that, out. I spent the whole day walking. The neighborhood was still so new that it felt like I was drifting through someone else's dream. Past the bakery I'd already planned to make my Sunday ritual. Past the little park where I'd imagined future barbecues, birthday parties, children's laughter that never had a chance to fill these walls yet. I called my mother. She always had the gift of seeing through me. "Leonie," she said after I told her what happened, "sometimes you have to be willing to lose something to find out what you're worth." But I didn't want to lose anything. Not the house, not my sanity, not myself. When I got home, Marcus was in the living room, his feet propped on the coffee table I'd fought to keep from our old apartment. "Did you get it out of your system?" he asked, smirking like we were just playing a game. I didn't answer. I just went to the kitchen and started cleaning the party mess piece by piece. Plates, glasses, the crumb trail of our life together. He watched me for a while, then disappeared upstairs. When I heard the door click shut behind him, I let myself breathe again. I opened my laptop at the dining table. If he wanted to play this game, I would play it better. I pulled up the mortgage agreement, our bank statements, the renovation receipts I'd kept organized in neat digital folders. I made copies of everything. I started an account in my name only, the first real secret I'd ever kept from my husband. It felt like treason. It felt like freedom. Days turned into a rhythm I could survive. We stopped talking about the party, the realtor, the estimate. We stopped talking, period. He kissed me on the cheek before work, like a man checking a box. I smiled back like a woman who was already somewhere else. At night, we lay back to back in that beautiful bedroom, the silence between us heavy with unsaid words. I learned how to hold my breath so I wouldn't wake him when I cried. A week later, I found a card in his jacket pocket. Tom Myers, the realtor. A note scribbled on the back, "Call me anytime." My blood turned to ice. He wasn't done. The next morning, I booked an appointment with a lawyer. Just information, I told myself. Just to know where I stood. The woman behind the polished desk listened to every word, nodding as I laid out my marriage like evidence in a trial I didn't know I'd already lost. "Liani, you need to protect your interests," she said gently. "He's already protecting his." Those words hit harder than I expected. Protect your interests. As if my love for him, my sweat poured into these walls, didn't count for anything unless I made it legal. That night, I couldn't keep the secret any longer. We were eating dinner, or pretending to, in the dining room that still smelled like new wood polish. "I saw the card in your pocket," I said, my fork clinking against my plate. He didn't even flinch. "So? So you're still talking to him?" "I'm allowed to plan ahead, Leonie. Don't make this ugly." Ugly. As if he hadn't already dragged my heart through the dirt. I pushed my plate away, my appetite gone. "If you think you're walking away with half of what I built, you're going to be disappointed." His eyes snapped up then. The first flicker of real anger I'd seen in him in months. "What did you say?" "You heard me," I said, standing. My knees were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "You want to play this like a business deal? Fine, I know exactly what I'm worth." He laughed. A cruel, sharp sound that bounced off the walls. "You think you're so smart, Leonie? You think you can outplay me?" I didn't answer. I just walked upstairs, every step an earthquake inside my chest. When I closed our bedroom door, I pressed my back to it and let the tears come. But under the tears, something stronger was growing, a rage that felt like steel. This house was not a pawn. I was not a share to be estimated. And Marcus Ward was about to learn exactly what that meant. I turned off the light and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling I'd painted eggshell white. Tomorrow, I would find out just how much fight I had left. And he would see it too. I woke up before dawn the next day. The sky still the color of ash outside our bedroom window. Marcus was already gone. No note on the nightstand, no message on my phone. Just the echo of a slammed door that hadn't fully shut behind him, a gap where warmth should have been. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, toes curling into the plush carpet I'd insisted on because I wanted something soft underfoot when the world felt too hard. I pressed my palms into my thighs, grounding myself. Then I pulled the ledger up on my phone, the growing list of every nail I'd hammered, every dollar I'd saved. Every late-night negotiation I'd handled alone, while Marcus chased deals that never seemed to close. I could have stayed there all day, but a dull throb in my chest pushed me forward. I dressed in jeans and an old sweater, hair tied back, face bare, no armor but my resolve. In the kitchen, I poured coffee into the mug that said, "Home is where the heart is." The irony made me laugh, sharp and bitter. I left the cup half full on the counter and walked out the door. By 9, I was sitting in front of Nora Quinn, the lawyer I'd met once before. Her office overlooked the river, the water cutting through the city like a vein. It made me feel small and wide open all at once. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. "You're ready?" she asked. I nodded. "Tell me everything I need to do to protect myself. And this house." Nora leaned back, her fingers drumming on the manila folder with my name scribbled in bold marker. "You need documentation, evidence, proof that this property isn't just community property to be split cleanly down the middle." I swallowed hard. "What about the improvements? The renovations I paid for?" "Receipts help. Emails, text messages, photos, all of it matters. Judges don't care about good intentions. They care about what you can prove." I nodded again, numb and strangely electrified at the same time. "I have it. All of it." She smiled, but there was no triumph in it. Then let's make sure he knows you're serious. We drafted letters. We outlined timelines. We spoke about property assessments and asset freezes. All things I'd never thought I'd say in the same breath as my marriage. By noon, my head ached with legal terms, but my spine felt a little bit straighter. Walking back to my car, I called my mother again. I told her everything. Every piece of the plan I hadn't dared say out loud until now. She listened, quiet except for her soft breaths in my ear. "Leonie," she said when I finished, "I'm proud of you. It takes courage to hold on. But it takes more to let go." I drove home with her words in my pocket like a talisman. I was ready to fight. But a small, stubborn part of me still hoped Marcus would see what he was losing and stop this before it went too far. He wasn't home when I got back. I spent the afternoon sorting every receipt and email into neat folders. I backed up everything to the cloud and stashed copies on a flash drive. I tucked deep into the drawer with my grandmother's old jewelry, just in case. When the door finally opened after 7, Marcus walked in like he owned the world. Suit jacket slung over his shoulder, that practiced grin ready for any neighbor who might see him. He found me in the study, surrounded by papers and open files. He raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" "Evidence," I said, not bothering to soften it. His eyes narrowed. "Evidence? You're making this ugly now, Leonie." "No," I said, rising to meet him eye to eye. "I'm making this fair." He laughed again, but there was an edge this time, a crack in his confidence. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't do that to me." "You already did it to me," I snapped, my voice shaking with fury and something dangerously close to freedom. "You brought a realtor to our housewarming party, Marcus. You made this about business. I'm just playing by your rules." He stepped closer, so close I could smell his cologne, the one I bought him last Christmas, back when I still believed gifts could fix things. "I gave you everything," he hissed. I barked out a laugh that tasted like rust. "You gave me lies and half-promises. I gave you this house. I gave you my trust." He flinched, just barely. "You're going to ruin us." "No," I said, my hands curling into fists at my sides. "I'm going to save myself." For a moment, I thought he might grab my arm, or shout, or plead, but instead he stepped back, eyes cold and calculating. "Fine, do what you want, but don't think you're going to keep me from what's mine." He stalked upstairs, the sound of his footsteps like a hammer driving the final nail into whatever we'd been. That night, I didn't lie awake, I didn't cry. I lay flat on my back and listened to the creaks and sighs of my house. My house, and I knew I'd crossed a line I could never uncross. In the morning, I called Nora again. "I want to go ahead with it," I said, my voice as calm as I could make it. "Let's file." "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure." The next week blurred into motions I never imagined for myself. Papers signed, accounts frozen, Marcus's shocked fury, the neighbors' polite confusion, friends choosing sides before they even heard the whole story. I didn't care anymore. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't sinking beneath someone else's choices. One night, a knock at the door jolted me out of the paperwork maze. I opened it to find Marcus on the porch, half drunk, half broken. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "Leonie," he whispered, "we don't have to do this." "We already did," I said. His eyes glistened with something like regret, but I didn't let it fool me. "You can't win this." I stepped back, my hand on the door. "Watch me." I shut the door on his pleading. I stood in the hallway, the weight of the lock clicking into place like a promise to myself. I was not a share to be estimated. I was not a line item on a ledger. And he was about to find out just how expensive it would be to underestimate me. I turned back to the dining table, the mountain of papers waiting for my signature. This time, my hand didn't shake at all. The pen left a groove in the paper as I signed the last page, my name bold and unshaken. I sat back in my chair, fingers trembling with adrenaline. The late afternoon light bled through the window, catching on the edge of the table where the mountain of paperwork had become my fortress. For a moment, I imagined all those signatures forming a wall between me and Marcus, high, thick, impossible to climb. I stacked the pages neatly, exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding since the night of that cursed housewarming party. When I pushed my chair back, the floorboards creaked, a reminder that this house was alive, that it remembered every word spoken inside its walls. The next morning, I drove the papers to Nora's office myself. I watched her flip through them, her red pen darting in and out, making tiny marks that felt like exorcisms. "You did well," she said, glancing up at me over her glasses. "Most people in your position would have folded." I shook my head. "I'm not most people." "No," she agreed, her lips quirking at the corners. "You're not." I left her office and stepped out into the crisp spring air. For the first time in weeks, I let myself feel how my lungs expanded, how the breeze brushed my cheeks like a promise of something better. The street was crowded with people living their small, ordinary lives, buying flowers, pushing strollers, holding coffee cups with both hands, like tiny shields against the world. I used to envy that ordinariness. Now I understood its price. At home, I busied myself with everything that had Marcus's fingerprints on it. The coat he'd left draped over the banister, folded and boxed, his extra toothbrush gone. His collection of craft beers still taking up half the fridge, uncapped, one by one, poured down the sink like they'd never existed. I half expected him to walk in and catch me in the act, but the house stayed silent, except for the hum of the fridge and the whisper of my own breath. It felt like shedding a skin I'd outgrown. Days stretched into weeks. Papers were filed, court dates set. Mutual friends who once invited us over for barbecues suddenly forgot to call me. My phone was suspiciously quiet. I didn't care. Every night I sat at my dining table, tracing the lines of my ledger like a map to freedom. Then came the letter. Folded crisp, slipped under my door when I was out buying groceries. Marcus's handwriting on the envelope. Too neat, too familiar. I opened it with my heart rattling in my chest. It wasn't an apology. Of course it wasn't. It was an offer, a division of assets so lopsided it was almost funny. He wanted the patio I'd dreamed of, the master bedroom I'd spent nights painting until my arms ached, the guest room where I'd imagined setting up an office when I finally took my design business full-time. And he wanted me to pay him, for emotional damages he called it, as if his betrayal had cost him more than it cost me. I sat at the kitchen table, the letter spread out before me like a challenge. I could almost hear his voice behind every carefully chosen word. Marcus, the charmer. Marcus, the dealmaker. Marcus, the man who thought I would fold the moment things got hard. I picked up my phone and dialed Nora. "Tell him no," I said, before she could even say hello. "I was hoping you'd say that," she replied. "You ready to fight?" "More than ready." A week later, we faced each other in mediation. He wore that same tailored suit he'd bought with the commission check I'd practically wrestled out of a reluctant client for him. He smiled across the table like this was just another business lunch, his lawyer perched beside him like a crow waiting for scraps. "Liani," he started, leaning forward, "we don't have to drag this out, we can be civil." "Then be civil," I said, folding my hands in my lap. "Stop trying to take what isn't yours." His smile tightened. "You think you're going to win this on sentiment? The court won't care how many late nights you spent painting." "No," I said, meeting his eyes, "but they'll care about the money trail, the invoices, the hours logged." I watched the color drain from his face just a shade. His lawyer shifted uncomfortably, shuffling the papers he hadn't expected me to have. I felt a bloom of something fierce in my chest, a tiny garden of hope pushing up through the rubble. Mediation ended with no agreement. The court date stayed locked on my calendar like a battle flag. I walked out into the parking lot, the spring air biting at my cheeks. I expected to feel crushed, but I felt strangely free. The house waited for me like an old friend when I got back. I slipped off my shoes in the hallway, feeling the grain of the hardwood under my feet. The silence was deep, but not empty. I padded into the kitchen, flicked on the kettle, watched the steam curl into the air like a benediction. A knock startled me out of my reverie. I opened the door to find Tasha standing there, my oldest friend, arms wrapped tight around a bottle of cheap wine. "You look like hell," she said, stepping past me without waiting for an invite. "Nice to see you too," I muttered. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd read Marcus's letter. Tasha poured the wine into mismatched mugs, her eyes sweeping over the empty spaces where his things had been. "You really going through with it?" she asked, her voice soft. "I am." "Good," she said, clinking her mug against mine. "About damn time." We talked for hours about the party, the realtor, the nights I'd spent awake while Marcus plotted his exit. Tasha's outrage came in waves, but beneath it was her fierce loyalty, the kind that reminded me who I'd been before I wrapped my life around a man who treated me like an asset. When she left, I stood by the window watching her taillights fade into the night. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, not empty, but waiting. Upstairs, I lay in bed with my phone glowing against the dark. I opened the folder with my ledger, flipping through the photos of every nail, every paint can, every invoice that bore my name. This was more than a fight for a house. It was a fight for the part of me I'd given up too easily, and I wasn't giving it up again. I closed my eyes, the weight of exhaustion pressing down on me like a blanket, but beneath it was steel. Tomorrow, I'd wake up and face him again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Because sometimes you don't win by walking away. Sometimes you win by standing your ground so firmly that the world shifts around you. And Marcus Ward was about to learn exactly how unshakable I could be. The next morning, the sun rose over my little patch of stubbornness like it was blessing the fight I'd picked. I woke up before the alarm, my eyes gritty but clear. I sat at the edge of the bed for a moment, flexing my fingers as if they still ached from gripping the pen the night before. The air smelled like fresh paint, faint even weeks after we'd finished the last coat. I wondered if Marcus even noticed the smell anymore. Probably not. He was still gone, probably hiding out at his buddy's condo downtown, where the couch was always open and the fridge always stocked with cheap beer. I pictured him there, complaining to anyone who would listen about how unreasonable I was being, how I was making things ugly, how it was all my fault. I smiled at that thought. A small secret smile that tasted like the first sip of strong coffee, because this time, it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my burden to carry anymore. Downstairs, I found the envelope he'd slid under the door in the middle of the night. Another offer, another insult. I didn't even open it. I dropped it straight into the trash, my hands steady as stone. I spent the day meeting with contractors. Not to plan more improvements, but to document the ones I'd already done. They shook my hand and gave me statements, printed out reports on the value added by every fixture, every new window, every custom cabinet I'd fought for. I tucked the folder into my bag like it was a talisman, proof that this home was more mine than it ever was his. By the time I got back, it was dusk. The house glowed warm from the porch light. I paused there for a moment, keys in hand, taking it in. It still looked like the dream I'd chased for so long. The dream he'd tried to slice up and sell off in bits. Inside, the answering machine blinked with a single message. Marcus's voice poured out like motor oil, smooth, cold, hard to wash off. "Leonie, you're making a mistake. If you think you're going to get everything, you're delusional. Let's be reasonable before you ruin both our lives." I deleted it before he could finish. That night, I made myself a simple dinner. No leftovers for him to come home to, no extra fork on the table. I ate in silence, every bite a tiny rebellion against the idea that I owed him anything. Halfway through washing up, my phone buzzed. Tasha again. "Tell me you didn't listen to his voicemail," she said as soon as I answered. "I didn't." "Good. Block his number." I laughed. "I'm not there yet." "Then at least keep ignoring him." "I will." She paused. "You're stronger than him, you know." "I'm starting to believe that." After we hung up, I sat on the back patio with a cup of tea, staring at the fence. Marcus once joked was overkill for this neighborhood. The same fence I'd painted myself when he disappeared for a weekend with his so-called work trip. The same fence he now claimed he deserved half of. A single moth battered itself against the porch light, stubbornly trying to get closer to something that would burn it alive. I wondered if that was me once, beating myself bloody against a glow that would never keep me warm. Not anymore. I went to bed with my phone on silent, my door locked, my resolve ironclad. The next few days passed in a flurry of appointments, signatures, and whispered encouragement from Nora, who'd become the voice I clung to when my own wanted to crack. We built my case brick by brick, each email and receipt a stone in the foundation. Then the storm hit. I came home one evening to find Marcus standing on the porch, the realtor beside him. They were both smiling, that tight, practiced grin men wear when they think they've already won. "Liani," Marcus called out, stepping forward. "Tom here wants to take another look." I planted my feet on the bottom step. "No." Tom's eyes darted to Marcus, uncomfortable. "Mrs. Ward, I'm just doing my job." "Not in my house, you're not." My voice was steady, strong. "You have no right." Marcus's grin faltered. "We both own this place." "Not yet," I shot back. "And until a judge says otherwise, you stay off my porch." Tom cleared his throat. "Marcus, maybe this isn't the right time." "It's exactly the right time," Marcus snapped. "She thinks she can bully me out of what's mine." I felt the heat in my veins, but I didn't flinch. "Get off my property now." We stood there in a silence so heavy it pressed into my lungs. Tom mumbled an apology and all but dragged Marcus down the steps. I watched them go, my heart hammering but my spine ironed straight. Inside, I locked the door behind me. Double-locked it. Deadbolted it. I stood with my back against the wood, breathing in the hush of my home, the walls that had become my witnesses. Upstairs, I found a new message on my phone. "You'll regret this," Marcus said. "You'll lose everything." I pressed delete. The next morning, Nora called with news. Marcus had filed for an emergency injunction to force a sale of the house. He was trying to push me out before the court could decide. My stomach lurched, but I forced myself to stand tall in my kitchen, staring out the window at the backyard I'd once dreamed of filling with laughter and barbecues and babies. "He won't win," Nora said firmly. "He doesn't have a leg to stand on, not with what you've documented. But he wants to rattle you. Don't let him." "I won't," I said. "He's not gonna win." That night, the dream came back. The one where I'm standing in an empty house, the walls stripped bare, my reflection staring back at me from the polished floors. But this time, when I wake, I don't feel the cold claw of fear in my chest. I feel ready. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe! Now, back to the story. I woke up before dawn, the edges of that dream dissolving like mist on the bedroom ceiling. The sheets were cool beside me, empty of Marcus's weight. It hit me again, that strange mix of grief and relief, like standing in the ruins of a house you built by hand and realizing the storm didn't destroy you with it. I dressed quickly, pulling on my softest sweater, the one I'd almost given away during our last move. It felt like armor now, hugging my shoulders as I padded barefoot down the stairs. I flicked on the kitchen light and stood there for a moment, staring at the island counter where the realtor's file once sat, where Marcus had grinned as he estimated how much of my life he'd claim. Not today, not ever. Nora had called it rattling the cage. That's what Marcus's emergency injunction was, a final, desperate play to scare me into folding. But the more he pushed, the more the walls seemed to rally around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every sunbeam spilling across the living room, felt like a reminder. This place was mine. Not because of some paper signed at an office, but because I poured my soul into its bones. I made coffee and took it to the back porch, where the sunrise was just starting to smear pink across the horizon. My phone buzzed, a text from Tasha. "You okay?" I typed back, better than ever. Court was in 3 days. Nora wanted me ready for any dirty trick Marcus might pull. "He'll try to paint you as unreasonable," she'd warned, her pen tapping out an anxious staccato on my file. "He'll say you're vindictive, that you're trying to punish him." "Aren't I?" I'd asked, my smile sharp. "No," she'd said. "You're protecting yourself. There's a difference." Protecting myself. I tasted those words now as I watched a sparrow dart across the fence. I wondered if birds knew how free they were, or if they only felt the wind when they were forced to fly. I spent the rest of that morning gathering every last piece of my story: text messages, voicemails, screenshots of his realtor's emails, the receipts from the contractor who replaced the rotting wood under the porch, the invoices for the landscaper who'd planted the lilac bushes by the fence, the ones I'd watered every morning before work. I even found old photos. Me in paint-splattered jeans, barefoot on the ladder, arms smeared with white primer. Marcus, nowhere in sight. I laughed when I found those. The kind of laugh that starts in your belly and curls up your spine, sharp and glorious. By evening, the box was full. I labeled it in big black marker, "Comtopt, Nushid, Nushidi Zikaros." Just that. Not evidence or divorce or Marcus. Home. When I stepped outside to take the trash out, the third bag that week of his old junk, letters, half-empty cologne bottles, the physical ghosts of promises long broken, I saw him. Marcus stood at the curb, leaning against the shiny black car he always said made him look successful. His arms were crossed. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Leonie," he called, his voice soft enough to almost fool me. "Can we talk?" I set the trash bag down by the bin. Talk about what? I woke up before dawn, the edges of that dream dissolving like mist on the bedroom ceiling. The sheets were cool beside me, empty of Marcus's weight. It hit me again, that strange mix of grief and relief, like standing in the ruins of a house you built by hand and realizing the storm didn't destroy you with it. I dressed quickly, pulling on my softest sweater, the one I'd almost given away during our last move. It felt like armor now, hugging my shoulders as I padded barefoot down the stairs. I flicked on the kitchen light and stood there for a moment, staring at the island counter where the realtor's file once sat, where Marcus had grinned as he estimated how much of my life he'd claim. Not today, not ever. Nora had called it rattling the cage. That's what Marcus's emergency injunction was. A final, desperate play to scare me into folding. But the more he pushed, the more the walls seemed to rally around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every sunbeam spilling across the living room, felt like a reminder. This place was mine. Not because of some paper signed at an office, but because I poured my soul into its bones. I made coffee and took it to the back porch, where the sunrise was just starting to smear pink across the horizon. My phone buzzed, a text from Tasha. "You okay?" I typed back, better than ever. Court was in 3 days. Nora wanted me ready for any dirty trick Marcus might pull. "He'll try to paint you as unreasonable," she'd warned, her pen tapping out an anxious staccato on my file. "He'll say you're vindictive, that you're trying to punish him." "Aren't I?" I'd asked, my smile sharp. "No," she'd said. "You're protecting yourself. There's a difference." Protecting myself. I tasted those words now as I watched a sparrow dart across the fence. I wondered if birds knew how free they were, or if they only felt the wind when they were forced to fly. I spent the rest of that morning gathering every last piece of my story: text messages, voicemails, screenshots of his realtor's emails, the receipts from the contractor who replaced the rotting wood under the porch, the invoices for the landscaper who'd planted the lilac bushes by the fence, the ones I'd watered every morning before work. I even found old photos: me in paint-splattered jeans, barefoot on the ladder, arms smeared with white primer. Marcus, nowhere in sight. I laughed when I found those. The kind of laugh that starts in your belly and curls up your spine, sharp and glorious. By evening, the box was full. I labeled it in big black marker, "Comtopt, Nushid, Nushidi Zikaros." Just that. Not evidence or divorce or Marcus. Home. When I stepped outside to take the trash out, the third bag that week of his old junk, letters, half-empty cologne bottles, the physical ghosts of promises long broken, I saw him. Marcus stood at the curb, leaning against the shiny black car he always said made him look successful. His arms were crossed. He looked smaller than I remembered. "Leonie," he called, his voice soft enough to almost fool me. "Can we talk?" I set the trash bag down by the bin. Talk about what? The waiting was its own test of strength. Days passed like a tightrope strung over a canyon of old memories and half-finished fears. Every morning I woke before the alarm, the house wrapped around me like a quiet witness to all the words I hadn't said yet. I filled the silence with little rituals. I watered the lilac bushes, snipping away the dead leaves Marcus once promised to take care of. I scrubbed the kitchen grout on my hands and knees, as if digging into those tiny crevices would cleanse the way he'd stood there that night with his realtor. measuring out my future like a square footage estimate. I didn't hear from him, not directly, but his presence lingered in the mailbox. Official letters stamped with his lawyer's name, half-hearted offers that Nora and I laughed over like old gossip. "They're just poking you for weaknesses," she'd say, tapping her pen against the edge of my file. "But they keep coming up empty." At night, when the wind rattled the shutters, I lay in bed with my phone face down on the nightstand. No more checking for his name on the screen. No more reading between the lines of his "I miss you" messages. If he missed me so much, he could sit in that absence like a man forced to live in a house with no furniture, no warmth, no soul. On the 5th day, Nora called. "The judge has set a date for the final hearing," she said. "It's soon. You ready?" I stood in the hallway, my free hand pressed flat against the wall Marcus used to lean against when he'd sneak up behind me and wrap his arms around my waist. "I'm ready," I said, and I meant it. The morning of the hearing, Tasha showed up at my door at 7 sharp, holding a thermos of coffee and a paper bag of blueberry muffins. "Fuel for the victory," she said, shoving them into my hands. "You don't have to come," I told her. She rolled her eyes. "Try and stop me." The courthouse lobby smelled like old carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Marcus stood by the far wall, his new lawyer, younger, sharper, more expensive, murmuring something in his ear. He looked up when he saw me. I met his eyes and didn't blink. Inside, the judge read through stacks of paper while we all sat in heavy silence. My mind wandered to the first night we moved in, how Marcus had carried me across the threshold like we were some magazine-perfect couple, how I'd laughed, kicking off my shoes, dreaming of babies and Sunday mornings and arguments that ended with kisses in the hallway. Now I watched him fidget with his tie, his knee bouncing like he couldn't wait for this to be over so he could find someone else to bleed dry. I almost pitied him. Almost. Nora stood when the judge called on her. She spoke for 20 minutes, a calm, relentless listing of every fact, every receipt, every word that painted my fight in sharp, undeniable strokes. She ended with the photos, me in my paint clothes, me on the ladder, me at the hardware store at midnight, with a credit card Marcus never paid off himself. His lawyer tried to spin it, called me vindictive, called me controlling, called me everything but the truth, a woman who refused to let her sweat and bruises be turned into someone else's bargaining chip. The judge cleared her throat when it was over, her eyes flicking from me to Marcus and back again. "Mrs. Ward," she said, "do you have anything you'd like to add?" I stood. My palms were dry. My voice, when it came, felt like the strongest thing I'd ever owned. "All I want is what's fair," I said. "And fair means what I built with my own 2 hands doesn't become a consolation prize for someone who never saw its worth until he wanted to sell it." Marcus opened his mouth, but his lawyer stopped him with a hand on his arm. Too late. His mask had already slipped. When the judge ruled, it felt like a door slamming shut behind me. The house would stay mine. The buyout I owed him was a fraction of what he'd asked for. A fair sum for a fair share of what he'd really done. Which, in the end, was not much at all. Marcus didn't look at me as we filed out. He was busy on his phone, calling someone who probably didn't know yet that they'd be next in line for his smiling deceit. Nora clapped me on the shoulder outside the courthouse. "You did it," she said. "You didn't fold." I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Instead, I laughed. A long, breathless laugh that felt like the first true exhale in months. Tasha drove me home. We sat on my back porch, the lilacs brushing our ankles, the sun dipping behind the fence that now belonged to me, and only me. "So what now?" she asked, cracking open 2 cold beers from the fridge. I looked around, the chipped paint that needed redoing, the dead patch of grass by the shed, the living room that still echoed at night. "Now?" I said, tipping the bottle back. "Now I make it mine all over again." Tasha grinned. "And next time?" I clinked my bottle against hers. "Next time there won't be a him, just me." We sat there until the stars came out, the night wrapping around us like a blanket I'd stitched myself, one stubborn thread at a time. Inside, I opened the ledger on my phone, the one I'd once filled with all the proof I needed to fight for what was mine. I scrolled to the bottom and tapped out a single new line. Home, paid in full. I closed the app and stood in the middle of my kitchen, my bare feet planted on the cold tile. I listened to the creaks and sighs of the walls, the hum of the fridge, the soft rustle of curtains brushing against window panes I'd washed myself. My home, my life, mine. And tomorrow? Well, tomorrow I'd wake up and fight again if I had to, but for tonight I didn't have to fight at all. The war was over. And I had won. I woke up the next morning to the hush that only comes when the world knows you've survived something big. No more emergency court dates on the calendar. No more phone calls to brace myself for. Just the echo of my own breath in a house that finally felt like mine in more than just name. The sun streamed through the bedroom window, catching on the corner of the mirror where I'd taped a sticky note, "You are not for sale." I'd written it the night after Marcus first brought the realtor over, my hand trembling as I pressed the paper in place. I hadn't taken it down since. Now I read those words out loud like a prayer. Downstairs, I made coffee, 1 mug, just for me. I sat at the kitchen table with my knees pulled up, the steam curling around my face. The Ledger app on my phone was still open to that last line. Home, paid in full. I traced the words with my thumb, almost not believing how solid they felt now. Tasha showed up before I even finished my cup. She didn't knock. Just let herself in like she'd done since we were kids sneaking in after curfew. "You ready to breathe yet?" she asked, dropping a grocery bag on the counter. "Maybe," I said. "Depends on what's in the bag." She pulled out a bottle of cheap sparkling wine, a loaf of sourdough, and a block of fancy cheese. "Breakfast of champions." I laughed so hard I snorted, a sound I hadn't heard from myself in months. We stood there, clinking mismatched coffee mugs filled with bubbles, the house echoing with something new. Not Marcus's charm or empty promises, but real, messy, alive laughter. "What are you going to do now?" Tasha asked, nibbling cheese off her fingers. "Fix things," I said, glancing around at the paint touch-ups I'd been putting off, the fence gate that still squeaked, the patches of dead grass that mocked my plans for a garden. All the things I wanted to do before, for me this time. "No more realtors showing up at parties," she teased. "God, no!" I rolled my eyes. "If a man wants to estimate my share ever again, he'll have to buy stock in my damn company." We spent the whole day like that, blasting music through the house, scribbling down lists on old scraps of paper. "New flower beds," Tasha said, ticking off each idea with a big black Sharpie. "A swing for the porch, a fresh coat of paint in the guest room. An office for you," she added, poking me in the side. "No more working from the dining table." That one stuck. I pictured it, the guest room transformed, my name on the door, my vision pinned to a corkboard instead of buried under Marcus's mess. A door that stayed shut when I needed it to, that no one barged through with half-baked plans to sell my life out from under me. When she finally left, the sun was slipping low, streaking gold through the front windows. I stood at the threshold, waving her off, the porch boards creaking under my feet like a promise that they'd hold steady no matter what. Inside, I wandered through the rooms in a daze, fingertips trailing along walls I'd painted alone while Marcus was too busy to help. My footsteps echoed off empty corners that didn't feel so lonely now. They felt like blank pages. I stopped in the master bedroom, my bedroom, where the boxes of his leftover things still sat by the closet door. It would have been easy to leave them there forever, the physical proof of the betrayal I'd survived. But survival wasn't the same as healing. One by one, I dragged them downstairs, stacking them by the front door. Then I wrote his name on a scrap of masking tape. Return to sender. It felt petty. It felt perfect. The next morning, I carried them out to my car and drove across town to his buddy's condo. I didn't ring the bell. I just left the boxes on the stoop, tucked the note under the handle, and walked away. No explanation, no apology, no fight left to give. On the drive back, I rolled down the windows, the wind tangled in my hair, the spring air cold enough to sting. I didn't mind, let it sting. Let it remind me that I was here, alive, intact, still whole despite everything he'd tried to carve away. Back home, the house felt different. Bigger, somehow, like the walls were breathing with me. I ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of the living room, surrounded by paint swatches and carpet samples. my feet bare and legs crossed like a kid making forts out of couch cushions. Somewhere in the middle of my second slice, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He'll regret this. No name, no context, but I knew who it was. I laughed. A real, belly-deep laugh that bounced off the empty walls and came back sweeter than any apology he could ever offer. I didn't reply. I blocked the number. Then I added another note to my ledger. Threats are empty when the house is full of you. That night, I slept with the bedroom window cracked open, the breeze rolling in soft as a lullaby. I dreamed of fresh paint, blooming lilacs, a fence gate that didn't squeak. I dreamed of hosting parties where no one weighed my worth in square footage. When the sun rose, I got up and pulled on my old paint-splattered jeans. I tied my hair up and grabbed the same brush I'd used that first night we moved in. It felt right to start with the guest room, my future office, my future period. As the first coat of new color went up, I hummed to myself. The house smelled like paint and possibility. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew this was just the beginning of everything I was about to build. I spent the next few days with a paintbrush in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. The walls of my future office drank in the new color greedily, a soft, warm shade that reminded me of the sunrise I'd watched the morning the judge said the house was mine. Each stroke was a promise to myself. This room, these walls, this breath, all mine, and never up for negotiation again. Tasha came by every evening, armed with takeout and a playlist that made me laugh so hard I had to put down the brush just to wipe my eyes. It's like watching you pull out splinters one by one, she said as we sat cross-legged on the tarp-covered floor, containers of noodles balanced on our knees. Every coat of paint is like a little exorcism. Then tomorrow I'm buying new curtains and holy water, I joked, but there was truth in it. Each thing I did by myself, each thing Marcus would have called overkill or a waste of money, felt like laying a brick in the foundation of the life I was choosing, not the one he'd tried to carve up behind my back. The days fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings were for coffee on the back porch, my toes curling against the cold boards as I watched the lilacs bud and stretch into spring. Afternoons were for trips to the hardware store, where I learned every aisle by heart and every clerk by name. Evenings were for painting, for fixing the squeaky gate, for sitting on the floor with Tasha dreaming about what I'd do next. What I hadn't expected was how quiet Marcus had gone. For weeks after the final hearing, his lawyer's letters had trickled in like acid rain. Petty complaints, half-hearted demands, misunderstandings about the payment schedule we'd agreed to. But now, silence. The first Saturday after I finished the office, I woke to find a single manila envelope on my porch. No note. Just my name scrawled across the front in his handwriting, the one I used to love reading on birthday cards and sticky notes left on the fridge. My pulse danced in my throat as I carried it inside, setting it on the kitchen table like it might explode. I made myself coffee first. I stood there, staring out at the fence he'd once threatened to get his share of if he couldn't get the house. It didn't feel like his fence anymore. It hadn't for a long time. When the mug was warm in my hands, I sat down and flipped the envelope open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a list, his list. The time I built the shelves in the garage. The time I fixed the leak under the sink. The time I called the bank when we missed the mortgage payment. At the bottom, he'd written, "You made it sound like you did this alone. It wasn't nothing." I laughed. It startled me how sharp it sounded in the empty kitchen. "You're right," I said to the walls. "It wasn't nothing. It just wasn't enough." I tucked the list into the folder I kept in the cabinet with all the other scraps of this war, a memento of the man who thought a few shelves could outweigh betrayal. The next week, I threw myself into the yard. I ripped out weeds with my bare hands, dirt caked under my nails, sweat running down my back as I pulled out everything that didn't belong. Marcus once told me landscaping was for people who didn't have real jobs. I smiled every time I unearthed another stubborn root. Neighbors stopped by to wave. Some brought over lemonade, brownies, kind words they'd never offered before, because they'd bought into the lie that Marcus spun at block parties. The lie that we were perfect, that I was lucky to have him, that I should be grateful someone so charming loved me enough to stay. One afternoon, While I was planting new tulips along the walkway, Mr. Crane from 3 doors down leaned over the fence. "Looks good, Leonie." "Thank you." He hesitated. "We, always thought Marcus was—" He trailed off, his eyes awkward on the ground. "A good neighbor," I finished for him, brushing the dirt off my gloves. "Yeah, he was. He just wasn't a good husband." Mr. Crane winced but smiled. "Well, it's your place now. Looks like it's in good hands." "It always was," I said, and I meant it. When the yard was finally cleared, I stood at the edge of the fence, sweat trickling down my spine, my palms raw and blistered. But the sight of that fresh earth, neat rows waiting for whatever I wanted to plant next, made the ache worth it. I ordered a swing for the porch. Tasha helped me hang it one sunny afternoon. We sat there for hours afterward, rocking back and forth, feet grazing the floorboards that Marcus used to complain were too soft, too fancy for this neighborhood. I'd picked them out because I wanted something that felt like walking on warmth, something that felt like home. "You ever think about selling?" Tasha asked, pushing off with her toes. "Just cashing out, buying somewhere else, a real clean slate?" I shook my head. "No, not this house." "Too many memories?" "Too much work," I said. "Too much proof that I can survive. If I sold it, it'd feel like I gave him something." Tasha clinked her lemonade glass against mine. "Then you stay. You build new memories on top of the old ones." "That's the plan." The swing creaked gently as we rocked back and forth. The tulips swayed in the breeze. The fence didn't squeak anymore. I'd oiled every hinge myself. That night I sat at my new office desk, the window open to let in the sound of the wind rustling the lilacs. I opened my ledger one last time and added a single line. "Nothing to estimate, everything to keep." I closed my laptop and leaned back, the house humming around me. No more realtors, no more offers, no more splitting shares like slices of stale pie. It was all mine. And I was all mine too. Tomorrow I'd wake up and paint another room, fix another corner, plant another row of flowers. Tomorrow I'd wake up home. Spring melted into summer like warm butter on toast. I woke each morning to the creak of the porch swing shifting in the breeze, the scent of fresh soil drifting through my bedroom window. The lilacs bloomed faster than I could have hoped, little explosions of color that caught the morning light and reminded me that growth was possible, even after a brutal winter. Tasha kept showing up, always with something in her arms, paint swatches, a new mug that said, "Time CEO of my own damn life," a stack of home magazines with sticky notes flagging ideas I might steal. "You're building a fortress," she'd say, leaning over my shoulder while I traced my fingers across new tile samples for the upstairs bathroom. "One brick at a time." She was right. Every project felt like a promise to myself that this house would never be a bargaining chip again. I refinished the floors in the hallway by hand, crawling on raw knees for hours until the old scratches were sanded smooth. I replaced the cracked window in the laundry room, the same one Marcus always said was good enough for now. Now was over. Now belonged to me. The ledger in my phone kept growing, but not with evidence this time, just little lines like diary entries. Fresh floors, fixed window, lilacs in bloom. Leonie still standing. Marcus stayed silent. Not a text, not a knock on the door. Once I spotted his car driving slowly past the house while I was planting marigolds by the fence. He didn't stop. Just rolled on by like a ghost peering through a window he no longer had the right to look into. Some nights, when the wind howled through the eaves, I'd wonder if I'd done the right thing, if all this fighting had really been worth it. But then I'd pad barefoot down the hallway, the floorboards warm and honey-colored under my soles, and stand by the window in my new office. The moon would hang low over my yard, washing the tulips in silver, and I'd remember, this fight was not about him, it was about me. About never again watching someone estimate my worth by the square foot. The neighborhood started to notice the change. Mr. Crane dropped off a tray of muffins one morning, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot as he glanced past me into my freshly painted foyer. "Looks good, Leonie," he said, his voice soft with something like apology. "It always did, just different now." "Yeah," I said, taking the muffins with a genuine smile. "It's honest now." The words settled between us like a peace offering. When he left, I carried the muffins to the kitchen, the smell of cinnamon and sugar mingling with the lavender candle I'd lit that morning. A scent that was mine. Not ours. Not his. Mine. One Thursday, I decided to have people over, my people. No fancy invites, no trying to impress. Just a few close friends, pizza boxes stacked on the counter, the screen door propped open to let the summer night drift in. We sat on the porch swing, feet up on the railing, passing a cheap bottle of wine between us. Laughter bubbled up like it hadn't in years. When someone asked, "Does it feel weird being here alone?" I just shook my head. "Not alone," I said, tipping my head back to look at the stars. "Just me, that's enough." Tasha raised her glass. "To Leonie's housewarming, the one that's really hers." The next day, I woke to find empty glasses still scattered across the porch. The swing swaying gently in the breeze. I gathered them up slowly, savoring the way the wood creaked under my steps. Every sound was a reminder. This place knew me now. All my storms, all my seasons. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. I stood at the kitchen counter, running my thumb over my name, written in the same looping script Marcus used when he signed birthday cards that said, "Forever." I didn't rush to open it. I made coffee first, humming under my breath as the kettle hissed. Inside was another list, shorter this time. No accusations, no threats, just a few lines scribbled on hotel stationery. "You were right, I didn't build it. No ice staircase, I didn't see it. No ice staircase, no signature. No apology, just that." I set the letter on the counter, folded my arms over my chest and waited for the old ache to twist in my gut. It didn't come. I didn't cry, didn't rage, just felt done. I tucked the letter away in the bottom of a box marked past, a relic, a reminder. Summer slipped into fall. The nights grew crisp, the lilacs faded, but the tulips thrived longer than I thought they would. I started planning for winter. New insulation in the attic, thicker curtains to hold in the warmth. Each decision felt like another thread in the tapestry I was weaving out of my own survival. One Saturday, I spent the whole afternoon painting the mailbox. Tasha leaned against her car, arms crossed, shaking her head as I balanced on the curb. "You're gonna paint the whole neighborhood next, aren't you?" she teased. "If I have to," I called down. "If that's what it takes to feel like I'm here." She grinned. "You're here, Leo, more than ever." When the paint dried, I traced my fingertips over my name in bold black letters. Leonie Ward. No hyphen, no +1, just me. That night, I curled up on the porch swing with a blanket, the wind rustling through the fence boards that no longer squeaked. I listened to the house breathe around me, a soft exhale that said, "Stay. Grow. Keep what's yours." And for the first time since the day Marcus brought that realtor into my kitchen, I let myself believe that I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Tomorrow, I'd oil the hinges on the back gate again. Maybe plant daffodils along the fence line. Maybe sand the porch steps down until they were smooth under my bare feet. Tomorrow, I'd wake up home. Tomorrow, I'd wake up mine. Fall crept in quietly, wrapping my little fortress in gold and amber. I woke each morning to a patchwork of leaves drifting across the lawn, the last blooms of the tulips bowing under the weight of the season. I liked the way the house felt in autumn, solid, settled, softer than it had ever been when Marcus's voice filled its corners. I spent weekends sealing drafts, tacking up weather stripping around the old windows Marcus always promised to replace but never did. I didn't mind the work. Each nail, each strip of insulation, was another stitch in the quilt I was sewing around myself. Proof that I could keep the warmth in and the ghosts out. Tasha called it my season of mending. Every Saturday, she'd show up with a basket of apples from the farmer's market, or a new fleece throw for the porch swing. "You're nesting," she'd tease, tossing apples in the air as I taped off baseboards for another fresh coat of paint. "And you're doing it like a warrior." She wasn't wrong. The paint in the living room was the last of the big projects I'd put off. It felt fitting to tackle it now, the color rolling on in slow, patient strokes. The old shade, a pale neutral Marcus liked to call resale-friendly, vanished under a warm, earthy tone that reminded me of cocoa and fresh bread. I kept the windows open as I worked, the crisp air swirling around me, the scent of fallen leaves blending with the tang of paint. Somewhere in that breeze was the echo of the party, the one where Marcus stood in this very room, charming the realtor with a crooked grin while I balanced trays of canapés and pretended not to hear the betrayal. That memory no longer stung the same way. It felt distant now, like a bad dream you squint at in the morning, wondering why it once held so much power over your heart. One night, I pulled the old guest book off the shelf, the one we'd bought for our so-called housewarming. Page after page of our friends' messages, scrawled in drunken, looping handwriting. Congrats, Leonie and Marcus. May this house be full of laughter, to a lifetime of memories. Don't forget us when you're rich and famous. I traced my fingertip over each line, feeling the brittle edges of the pages. Then I closed it, slipped it into the box in the attic with the other relics I no longer needed on my shelves. In their place, I stacked books about gardening and design. I started sketching plans for raised beds in the spring. A fresh herb garden by the kitchen window. Maybe even a tiny greenhouse tucked behind the shed. Tasha offered to help. "We'll get our hands dirty," she said, "and we'll plant it all so deep that nothing shallow can touch you again." The nights got longer. The wind carried the first hint of winter, rattling the lilac bushes now bare of blooms. I didn't dread the cold. Not this time. I stacked firewood in neat rows along the fence, patched up the last drafty corners, bought thick quilts for the bedroom. One evening I found a note stuck under the welcome mat, a single scrap of paper with Marcus's handwriting, smudged from the damp. "I'm sorry," it said. Just that. No, for what? No, I was wrong, just I'm sorry. It felt like the apology he thought I still needed to hear. But I didn't. Not anymore. I burned it in the fireplace that night, watched the edges curl to ash, the flame flickering against the new paint like a blessing. In December, I hosted a small gathering. Not a party, just a few people I loved, a pot of stew bubbling on the stove, the fireplace crackling. Tasha brought her brother and his wife. Mr. Crane even stopped by with a tin of cookies, his eyes wide at the sight of the living room that looked nothing like the one Marcus once measured out like a balance sheet. We sat on the floor by the fire, swapping stories, passing around mugs of mulled wine. No realtor standing in the corner scribbling numbers on a notepad. No husband calculating my worth by the square foot. Just warmth and laughter, and the kind of silence that wraps around you soft and forgiving. When they left, I stood at the window and watched the taillights wind down the street. I pressed my palm to the cold glass, feeling the echo of my own heartbeat steady and sure. In the months that followed, the final legal details fell away like dead leaves. The last payment Marcus was owed cleared. Nora called to say it was officially done. No more loose ends. I thanked her, then took myself out for breakfast, ordering pancakes with extra syrup like a kid celebrating something only they understand. Sitting at that little diner table, I opened my ledger app for the last time. I read every line, the nails hammered, the paint rolled, the weeds pulled, the receipts filed. The ledger that started as a battle plan and became a story about a woman who wouldn't let herself be sold off piece by piece. I scrolled to the bottom and typed one final entry. Fortress, complete. Back home, I pulled on my thickest sweater and went out to the porch swing, coffee steaming in my hands. The garden beds were covered with straw for the winter. The fence stood strong. The squeaky gate swung open with a gentle creak, the only sound I hadn't oiled away because I'd grown to love its small, stubborn song. When the wind picked up, I pulled the blanket tighter around my shoulders. The house settled behind me, warm and solid, mine. A place no one would ever estimate again, a place no one could walk through with a folder of market values and a calculator, a place that breathed with me, walls stitched with my sweat, floors washed with my tears, doors slammed shut and reopened 1,000 times in my head before they ever moved on their hinges. I took a deep breath, felt the porch boards shift under my feet, heard the walls sigh around me. And I knew this was not just a house anymore. It was the truest, fiercest thing I'd ever built. Tomorrow, the snow would come. I'd shovel the path myself, salt the steps, wrap the lilacs in burlap to keep the roots warm until spring. Tomorrow I'd brew coffee strong and stand at the window, tracing frost patterns with my fingertip like constellations I'd charted alone. Tomorrow I'd wake up home. Tomorrow I'd wake up free. Winter came slow and steady, each snowflake a quiet blessing on the roof I once thought he'd take from me. I woke up every morning to the hush of fresh snow piled on the fence, the porch swing half buried under drifts, the lilacs bundled tight in burlap like sleeping children waiting for spring. Inside, the house hummed with warmth. I wrapped myself in thick sweaters and thick thoughts, the kind that come when you know the battle is over, but the rebuilding never really ends. Every corner I'd patched, every squeaky hinge I'd oiled, every coat of paint I'd laid down with trembling hands in the early days of my freedom. All of it felt like armor now, a second skin woven out of my own courage. Tasha still came by every week, tracking snow through my hallway as she dropped bags of groceries or new books on the kitchen counter. "It's like you're nesting for good now," she'd say, her voice echoing off the warm walls. "No more fighting, just planting roots." One evening, as the snow fell thick against the windows, I sat at the dining table with my ledger open one last time. I'd started it to prove what was mine. Now every line read like a love letter to myself. Nimes new locks, new garden, new coat of paint, new life. No realtor would ever step through my door again, with a tape measure and a fake smile. No man would ever stand at my kitchen island, calculating my worth like numbers on a spreadsheet. I closed the ledger, tucked it into the back of a drawer, and made myself a cup of tea. The steam curled around my face, carrying hints of chamomile and the ghost of every sleepless night I'd survived. I thought I'd feel lonely now that the fighting was done, but what I felt was bigger than loneliness. It was spaciousness. A room inside me that had always been there, waiting for the noise to die down so it could breathe. One morning in late January, I bundled up and walked the perimeter of my yard, the snow crunching under my boots. The fence stood firm, the gate swung open with that soft, familiar creak I'd come to love. I checked the lilacs, their roots sleeping deep and sure. "Hang in there," I whispered to them, "spring's coming." Back inside, I took my coffee to the porch swing and let the cold bite at my cheeks. I watched the street where Marcus's car used to sit, headlights flickering as he plodded his way out. Nothing there now but tire tracks and the quiet hum of a neighborhood that had learned to mind its own business. Sometimes I wondered what he thought of me now, if he still told himself stories about the house he lost, as if he'd ever really owned it in the first place. But the wondering didn't stick like it used to. I'd learned you can't carry someone's ghosts when you're busy tending your own garden. One night, a card arrived in the mail, no return address, just my name in his familiar scrawl. I held it for a long moment before I opened it. Inside, "Hope you're okay," 3 words. A man's entire smallness folded into a single sentence. I didn't burn it this time. I didn't hide it away either. I slipped it under the tray on my hallway table, a footnote in a story that wasn't about him anymore. February thawed the edges of my yard. I spent afternoons pruning dead branches, pulling up weeds before they could root too deep. The sun felt stronger each day, the light catching in the windows I'd washed myself, the same ones that once blurred my reflection when I didn't know who I was looking at. One Saturday, Tasha brought over seeds for the spring garden. We sat cross-legged on the living room floor, packets spread out like tarot cards. "You're going to need bigger beds," she said, grinning as she pointed out rows of basil, tomatoes, daisies, and lavender. "Bigger beds, stronger fences," I said. "More to keep." And that's how it was. Each day a layer, each project a new vow. I refinished the kitchen cabinets. Replaced the old brass faucet I'd once fought Marcus over. Now gleaming and modern, a testament to the fights I no longer had to justify. On the first warm day of March, I opened all the windows. The house breathed with me, fresh air rolling through rooms that once held the stale hush of secrets. I stood in the middle of the living room, arms spread wide, head tipped back. Mine, asterisk, I whispered to the walls. Mine. And no one else's. Neighbors waved as I started pulling up the last of the winter debris in the yard. A little girl from next door toddled over, pressing a dandelion into my hand. Pretty, she said, eyes wide. I tucked it behind my ear, dirt under my nails, the warmth of spring under my skin. By April, the lilacs began to bud again. Small signs of the roots I'd protected all winter, the blooms I'd promised would come back. Each one a tiny flag that said, "This place survived. I survived." I planned my first real housewarming, the one I'd never truly had. No realtors, no quiet deals happening in the corner, just my people. Tasha brought wine, the Cranes brought pie. Laughter spilled across the porch and down the steps, soaking into the boards that had once been weighed down with suspicion and loss. We toasted in mismatched glasses. We danced barefoot on the back patio. We lit a fire in the pit I dug with my own hands, and watched the sparks rise like prayers whispered to the night. When the last guest left, I stood alone in the doorway, warm air curling around my ankles. The lilacs rustled in the dark. The porch swing swayed gently, as if reminding me that nothing worth keeping is ever truly still. I went inside and stood in the middle of the kitchen, that same space where he'd once laughed with his realtor about how much he'd get when it was all over. It was over now, and I was still here. I poured myself a final glass of wine, raised it to the ceiling, to the house that couldn't be sold, to the walls that held, to the roots that didn't rot, to me. I closed my eyes and felt the house breathe back. Tomorrow, I'd wake up early and plant the first row of daisies by the fence. Tomorrow, I'd fix the gutter over the porch. Tomorrow, I'd sweep the kitchen floor for the 1,000th time and watch the sunlight dance across my clean countertops. Tomorrow, I'd wake up home. Tomorrow, I'd wake up free. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them! Subscribe and turn on notifications.